Hey everyone, this is Cody, and today I'm going to be bringing you a test of the ZWO AM5 mount with a super heavy setup. This is my Meade Schmidt-Newtonian with all this equipment on here. And I'm actually going to weigh this setup later in the video, but we'll see how the AM5 does with my heaviest telescope. I'm not aware of many tests on YouTube testing harmonic or strain wave gear mounts with heavy payloads. Most people are using small to medium refractors on these harmonic mounts, so we're going to see how the auto-guiding performance specifically is with the AM5 mount and a massive payload like this one. Now, traditional advice when using a German Equatorial Mount, or GEM, is to never exceed 50% of the mount's payload capacity for astrophotography. Now, with a harmonic mount or a strain wave gear mount, that should not be the case. We should be able to go a lot higher than that 50% capacity and put on a heavy telescope and still get good auto-guiding results. So again, that's exactly what I'm going to be trying today. And in order to test this effectively, I need to eliminate as many variables as possible so that we're not testing other factors, we're solely testing the mount itself. The first variable that I like to eliminate is the tripod. Now, the ZWO TC40 carbon fiber tripod is an excellent tripod. However, if you plan on using a large Schmidt-Cassegrain, Ritchie-Chrétien, or Newtonian with your AM5, the TC40 is going to affect your guiding numbers. It did on mine, but when I switched to a good quality tripod, my guiding numbers came way down. So the guiding is definitely affected by the tripod, and it needs to be addressed first and foremost. So for me, I go with the Celestron AVX Tripod. This has 2-inch stainless steel legs, and then I use the ZWO PE200 Pure Extension for 2 reasons. The first reason is it gives me a good solid mounting base and I'm not going to hit my telescope into the tripod legs. And the second reason is it actually adapts the Celestron AVX 10mm threads to the AM5's 3/8 threads. So you don't have to do any thread converting or anything like that. Now, I do have 2 videos on how to convert an AVX tripod for use with the AM5. I definitely recommend method number 2 that I show in the second video, but I'll post links to both of those, and if you are interested in using a Celestron AVX tripod with the AM5, you can see how to do it. But a quality tripod is absolutely key for this test, so that is the first variable and definitely the big factor that you have to consider when using a heavy telescope. Variable number 2 is the collimation of the telescope. A Schmidt-Newtonian is a difficult instrument to collimate. I am not great at it, so I can tell you right now it is not properly collimated. I tried my best, but we're not going to be focusing so much on the quality of the image, so much as how well the mount is guiding, and that's going to tell you whether it can handle those heavy payloads. So again, don't worry so much about the quality of the image, worry more about the quality of the auto-guiding. And lastly, I chose to do this test in the winter rather than in the summer because I get some very clear, dark skies. In the summer, I get kind of hazy skies. So hopefully with all those things considered, the tripod, collimation, and some good sky conditions, we can really test the performance of this second generation AM5 mount with a very heavy telescope setup. Okay, so just to give you a quick rundown of the SN10, with the tube rings and just the optical tube itself, I believe it comes in around 35 pounds. Now, I've done a lot to the SN10, so it's going to weigh quite a bit more than that. So I'm going to give you a little walkthrough here of the telescope. Okay, so on the top here, I have an ADM Vixen bar that I use as a handle on the SN10, so that's adding a little bit of weight, as well as a older ZWO ASI Air Pro. I'm using Explore Scientific 50mm finder or guide scope rings, as well as an Agena Astro Star Guider 2 50mm guide scope with a helical focuser. And then on the guide scope itself, I have a ZWO 178 MC. The bulk of the extra weight is coming from my Moonlight focuser, and I love Moonlight focusers for the Schmidt-Newtonians specifically because Moonlight actually makes a flange for this telescope, and it does not require any modification. It uses the existing focuser holes, which is really nice. But you can see I've got some extensions on there, as well as the Moonlight focuser. I've got a ZWO filter drawer and an ASI 294 MC Pro camera. And this is what I'm going to be using on night 1. We're going to guide with the 50mm guide scope, at about 160 millimeter focal length. So it's not going to be too pressing on the mount, I hope. And then on night 2, we're going to step it up and use the 2600 MC Duo and guide at the native focal length of the SN10. So again, there is a decent amount of added weight right here on the focuser, but it is much, much, much more rigid than the stock focuser is. And last but not least, I have removed the stock mounting plate. It's proprietary to the Meade LXD75 and Explore Scientific Exos 2, and I think those mounts are clones of a Vixen mount. It's just not a very good mounting plate. I've added an ADM Losmandy plate, so this is going to definitely add some weight, but a lot more rigidity. It spread the weight of the telescope out a bit more, so this is a much better mounting solution overall. So I've added a lot of weight to an already heavy and gigantic telescope, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking seeing it on such a small mount, but according to the specs, it should work just fine. So we're going to see how it does, and we'll go ahead and get this thing weighed. For some reason, telescopes feel like they weigh double what they're advertised. So I'm going to guess that this SN10 setup I have here is at least 40 pounds. I've never weighed this. Your first look will be my first look. But that's my guess, is at least 40 pounds. Probably a little bit heavier than that. So I've got my scale. I did remove the dust cover. This is exactly how it will be on the mount. All the cables are on here and everything. So this should be the exact weight that I'll be putting on the AM5. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how much this weighs. Okay, here we go. Oh my gosh, that's heavy. And a bit awkward. Okay. Is that all the way on there? It is. Let the scale stabilize and pop it off. 40.2 pounds, no way. You all probably think I'm cheating. I have never seen that before. Oh man, 40.2. Well, I knew it was probably more than 40. I actually have one more scale, and I'm gonna try that one too, just to see how close the numbers agree with each other. But yeah, that is a heavy, heavy scope. 40.2 pounds. All right, this is my wife's fancy scale, and she's not home right now, so I'm putting a telescope on it while she's gone. We'll see if I can figure out how to work it. I'm hoping it just turns on there. Okay, I'm just gonna let this stabilize again and pop it off. 40.0. Okay, so those two numbers agree pretty well with each other, 40.2 and 40.0. Wow, that is a heavy telescope. With telescopes heavier than 28 pounds, you will need to use a counterweight on the AM5. Taking a quick pause to the video, I realized while editing that I said the AM5N supports a capacity of 28 pounds without a counterweight. That is incorrect. It actually supports a capacity of 33 pounds or a mass of 15 kilograms without a counterweight. Anything above 33 pounds on the AM5, you will need a counterweight, as I was explaining in the video, so let's get back to it. Now the maximum weight of the counterweight that you can use is 11 pounds or a mass of 5 kilograms. It just so happens that the Celestron CGX counterweights that I have for my CGX mount are exactly 11 pounds, so they work perfectly. And the counterweight shaft on the AM5 is 20 millimeters. These are also 20 millimeters, so they work perfectly. I'll include a link in the description below, but if you ever need to use a counterweight on the AM5, the Celestron CGX ones work great. Okay, so this weighed in at roughly 40 pounds. The max capacity that ZWO advertises for the AM5 with a counterweight is 44 pounds. So we're at roughly 91% of the total capacity of this mount. That's a lot higher than the traditional 50% rule. We're going to go easy on the AM5 with the first test. I'm going to be using the ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro camera. With the SN10, the image scale for this is going to be 0.94 arc seconds per pixel. The guider is the Agena Starguider 2 50mm guide scope with a ZWO 178 MC camera. So the guiding scale is going to be 3.06 arc seconds per pixel. Now I say we're going easy on the mount, but we're really not. I mean, with 40 pounds here, we're at basically 91% of its capacity. So we'll see how it guides with that. For test number 2, we're gonna kick it up a notch and go with the ASI 2600 MC Duo. This has an integrated guide chip with the main imaging sensor. With the SN10, I'm going to get an imaging scale of 0.76 arcseconds per pixel and a guiding scale of 0.81 arcseconds per pixel. So this will be a significant challenge. We'll see how well the AM5 guides with these two tests, and hopefully it goes well. So let's get to it. All right, it's a perfectly clear night, so it's going to be great for testing out the AM5 with this massive payload. I've got the main imaging camera focused as well as the guide scope focused, so it's time to pull our line, and then we'll start the auto guiding test. Scope is so heavy, I'm having a little bit difficult time moving it up in altitude. It's moving, but it's very slow. Okay, I'm calling that good. So my altitude error is 36 arcseconds, and my azimuth error is only 6 arcseconds. So we're calling that good. I'm gonna hit finish. We'll send the mount back to the home position. Pick a target and we'll make the auto guiding test here. And I just about got cracked in the head. All right, the target is M42, so let's go ahead and slew over there. What I'm looking at right now is 30-second unguided exposures of the Orion Nebula with the Meade SN10, and honestly, I am pretty impressed of the unguided performance of the AM5N with this much weight. I thought for sure I'd start to see star trails, but these stars are fairly round. A tiny bit of trailing, but a lot less than I was expecting for unguided. So I'm going to go ahead and calibrate the auto guider now. Okay, here's a live look at the guide scope with the ZWO 178MC camera. 2.4 micron pixels, nice and small. I'm gonna go with 3-second exposures, and we'll calibrate the guider now. Cross our fingers and see if it gives us great results with this big, heavy setup. Now you might be wondering why I chose 3-second guide exposures on this harmonic mount when most people use 1 to 2 seconds maximum. And the real reason for it is I have unusually low periodic error on this AM5. So I just chose to go with 3-second exposures and default RA and declination aggressiveness settings just to see how it went. Now with harmonic mounts, you're usually going to see much different guide settings than you would with a traditional mount. You're going to have lower exposures. Your maximum RA and declination durations are probably going to be lower, and your RA and declination aggressiveness is going to be lower. So at the end of this video, I'm actually going to give you a list of my recommended harmonic mount guide settings so you can check those out. But really, it's just a bunch of trial and error and what works best with the given setup that you're using. So that's the reason I went with 3-second guide exposures. I'm just testing out my mount and its limits. So with that said, let's go ahead and get back to the auto guiding calibration in test number 1. Okay, I'm gonna let this steady out for about 5 minutes. I'm gonna come back and we're gonna look at the numbers, but I can't believe with such a heavy payload that this mount is guiding this good. That is awesome. So we'll let this settle out and come back and check it out. I'm gonna take a 5-minute exposure and we'll see how it does. So I'm gonna start that now and I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, first 5-minute exposure just finished. Guiding is still looking excellent. And we'll wait for it to download because my ASIR Pro is very old and very slow. So those numbers are extremely impressive right there. 0.59 arcsecond error in RA, 0.29 in dec. I am very relieved right now. This mount is more than capable of guiding with a super heavy payload on it. So that 50% astrophotography rule that we use when we talk about German equatorial mounts obviously does not apply to harmonic or strain wave gear mounts. Okay, image is just about done downloading. Yeah, awesome. look at that. Nice round stars. My collimation is not great, but we're not testing collimation. We're testing the mount. And look at that. 5 minutes with a mount that's that heavy, or that telescope that's that heavy. That is extremely impressive. So the Orion Nebula actually is not my target tonight. I'm actually shooting for the Black Eye Galaxy. So I'm going to slew over to that, wait a couple hours for it to rise a little higher, and then we'll see how this big 10-inch Schmidt-Newtonian does on a galaxy. And then that's going to go well, I'm sure. So this telescope will be great for galaxy season. Alright, so night one was very successful, guiding with the SN10 and the AM5 using the Agena Starguider 50mm guide scope. Tonight, for night two, I'm going to kick it up a notch, and we're going to use the ASI 2600 MC Duo, which has a built-in guide camera. So tonight, we are going to be guiding at the SN10's native focal length of 1000mm, plus or minus, and we'll see how the AM5 handles that. Now, there's no way that the SN10 is going to fully illuminate my guiding chip. The image circle, I can guarantee you, is not going to be large enough to do that. So my guide stars might be a little bit weird shaped, but it still should work out. So I think I'm going to shoot for Orion tonight. Last night it looked great in my little practice run, so I decided tonight I'm going to shoot for that. And we'll see how the AM5 does guiding with the 2600 MC Duo and this massive Schmidt-Newtonian setup. Now, we've had some bad weather lately, so it's actually a week later for test number two. The moon is out right next to the Orion Nebula, so I'm not going to shoot Orion anymore. Instead, we're going to calibrate the guider in Canis Venasitae in the east, and then I'm going to shoot Bode's Galaxy or Bode's Nebula tonight at the full focal length for the main imaging camera and the guide camera. So let's go ahead and see how it performs for test number two here. So just as I expected, the guide sensor is cut off a bit. The image circle is not large enough on this Meade SN10, so I'm getting, comet-shaped stars, which I kind of expected, but I actually think this will work. So I'm just gonna hit the calibrate button, and we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it goes well. But yeah, that first test went really good, so hoping this second one does too. Okay, guiding just finished calibrating, so I'm going to let this settle out for a few minutes here, and then we'll take a look at the numbers. The mount has been auto-guiding for about 2 to 3 minutes now. It's settled out nicely, averaging about 0.65 arc seconds of total error. So we're looking good so far, actually. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slew over to Bode's Nebula, Bode's Galaxy, and the Cigar Galaxy, and we'll see how auto-guiding changes when we get to the target. But so far, so good. I'm pretty optimistic now at this point. Okay, I've just recentered it so that I've got M81 and M82 in the same field of view here, and guiding has restarted, so let's see how it does. Here comes the first 1 minute preview image. Guiding error is about 0.6 arc seconds total right now. I'm gonna get rid of the crosshairs here, and we'll see how it looks. Be good. Come on, be good. Guiding is still excellent, but it's amazing to me to see how much more apparent collimation and coma issues are when using an APS-C sensor. Okay, so what you see on the screen right now was the first 1 minute exposure. Now I'm about to finish the first 3 minute exposure, and check out those guiding numbers. 0.48 arc seconds of total error. So at 1000 millimeters with a 40-pound telescope, this mount is handling it just fine. All right, so let's download this 3 minute exposure, see how it looks. Oh wow, look at that. My ASIR Pro finally decided to download fast. Maybe it's not so old after all. All right, let's take a look. Barring there's probably some collimation issues here, but... So test 1 with the 50 millimeter guide scope went just fine. Test 2 at the native 1000 millimeter focal length of the SN10, just fine. So I'm gonna image the rest of the night now and see if I can produce something acceptable. I'm getting decent guiding even with default aggression settings and 3-second exposures. At this point though, I definitely recommend no more than 2-second exposures with these harmonic mounts. And be sure to see my recommended AM5 auto guide settings at the end of the video. Okay, so test number 2 is done, and I brought the data here into PixInsight, as I like to blink through it just to see if there's any frames that definitely need to be deleted from guiding issues or anything like that. So I took 3 minute exposures and I took 60 of them, so that's about 3 hours total, and as I blink through here, you'll see that the meridian flip happened pretty quickly, and guiding restarted on its own, and stars look pretty good for the entire night. So I actually am not going to toss any of my exposures here. I'm going to use all 60 of them in my stack. And yeah, you can see guiding looks pretty tight at 40 pounds on the AM5, so that's pretty impressive. I also have the guide log, and as I reviewed this from last night, there wasn't anything that really stood out to me as unusual, so it looks like a pretty typical guide log. Good guiding all the way through the night until it ended on its own. So overall, seems like the AM5 is able to handle that 40 pounds of weight with no problem. Auto guiding is nice and tight, so seems like a pretty successful test. That wraps up this test of the AM5 with a heavy payload. As you saw on test number 1, the guiding was excellent, as well as at the native focal length in test number 2, the guiding was still great. So the 50% payload rule for astrophotography does not really apply to strain wave geared mounts, just excellent performance overall. So I hope you enjoy tests like this and you found it valuable. As always, thanks so much for watching, and clear skies.